Hi everyone, Elsie Jensen here. So today we had yesterday finished up day 7 of our starter journey. So now it is time to make some sourdough bread. So I fed my starter about 6 hours ago and look how it is exploding out of it. It actually natural gas release popped the cheesecloth off of my thing and it is just bubbling over. So I'm actually really happy about this because to me, this tells me that this is going to make a great sourdough bread. So let's start out for my basic recipe. And this is for a loaf and a half of my basic one, but I think I'll update my new one here. But it starts out with 150 grams of active starter. So active starter means that you have fed it in the last 4 to 8 hours. So it is bubbly. You've got a lot of action going on in there. Typically, what you do is when you feed it, it should kind of double in size. And as you can see, that's what I did. You can kind of see the bubbles peeking through the glass here. So when I stick my spatula in here, this should all start to sink down. And do you see how it's just decreasing inside? Because I'm letting out the air. So this is a great bubbly active starter. So it's already dropped down almost half of the way. So now we are going to add in 150 grams of this starter to our bowl. You're going to want to use a scale and do it in grams because that's how it just comes out so much easier. Especially with like your starter, if it's really like bubbly, it can have little air pockets in it. There we go. So I've got right at 150 grams of starter. We're going to have to clean our jar up at the end because it's quite messy there. We're going to bring our scale back down to 0. Now we are going to add in 565 grams of water. There we go. Ooh, exactly 565. Look at that. Okay. I'm going to bring my scale back down to 0. We're going to take it off. And then I'm going to use a dough whisk or a Danish whisk. So this works much better than a spoon because it has this like little swirl here, which allows the starter to mix through. And then when we add in our flour, it's going to allow it to mix up nicely instead of sticking to our spoon. So I'm going to dilute my starter into my water, and you want to use warm water. So I have 565 grams of warm water in here, and we're going to stir this until it is all completely diluted together. So you'll have a nice creamy white mixture. This is going to allow the starter to equally go into your flour and not just have pockets everywhere. Okay, now we are going to add about 15 grams of salt, which is the same to about a tablespoon of salt or 3 teaspoons. So I always just eyeball mine, but 15 grams is kind of where you're aiming for. So that's 1, 2, 3 teaspoons there or a tablespoon. And we're going to stir this up into our starter mixture. And then we are going to add on here, we're going to add 750 grams of bread flour, unbleached bread flour. You want to use bread flour for this because it has a higher gluten content and it's going to give you more elasticity and build a better crumb. So we want about 750 grams of unbleached bread flour. And when doing sourdough, I always use unbleached flour because it just gives the bleached product kills off all the natural yeast which you need because sourdough doesn't have any added yeast in it. Okay. So we are there we go. So 750 grams of unbleached bread flour. We're going to take our dough whisk here and we are going to mix it up. And this is where your dough whisk comes in so handy. It's so much better than a spoon because as you can see, it's just allowing the mixture to pass through it. So it's going to give a much better a mix to it. So we're going to mix this up for it. And now sourdough, if you're not used to it, if you've never made it before, it's a high hydration bread, which means it's going to be very sticky in the beginning to work with. But the more you work with it, the more less sticky it becomes. But it's never going to be like a yeast bread, which is like, you know, where you knead it and stuff like that. This is going to use a technique called stretch and folds, which is what you use in place of kneading. So what you do is once you've had it mixed up like this, and it's going to look like it's super wet and doughy, but this is exactly what it's going to look like. It will come together more as it goes. So you're done making it for right now. And so what the next step is, in 30 minutes, we are going to do our first set of stretch and pulls. And we will do that for the next 2 hours. Every 30 minutes, we're going to do a set of stretch and pulls. So we'll be back in 30 minutes for our stretch and pulls. Okay, it has been 30 minutes since we mixed together our dough. As you can see, it's still kind of sticky as it's a high hydration dough. So the trick to getting it to not stick to you is to dip your fingers in water, and it creates kind of a non-stick surface. And then we're going to pull up and fold it over. So pull up and fold it over. This is what I call my stretch and fold. You are essentially stretching the dough out, and then you're folding it on top of each other. So this is what you do with sourdough instead of kneading, because it is such a high hydration dough that it's really hard to knead without it sticking everywhere. So you're just going to do a couple sets of stretch and folds, and then you're going to let it sit. You can cover it and let it sit for 30 minutes. Okay, it has been 30 minutes since our last stretch and folds. So I'm going to dip my fingers again. This is going to help the dough not stick to me. And we are going to pull and fold. And I can already tell that this is going to make a pretty good loaf because it's got a nice, soft, kind of spongy feeling to it. It's not super dense. It's starting to get light and fluffy. And I even saw a couple bubbles forming in it. So we're just doing our stretch and pull. And then I always kind of like twist it into a little ball. And then we're going to cover it and let it sit for another 30 minutes. Okay, it has been 30 minutes since our second stretch and fold. So now we are going to do our third stretch and folds. And as you can see, the dough for our sourdough is already starting to get a little bit more poofy. It's starting to rise up some. I'm going to wet my fingers. That way I have kind of a non-stick surface, and we're going to stretch and pull. Stretch and pull. Stretch and pull. And just working it back and around. There we go. And now we will put our cover back on and let it sit for 30 minutes to do our last set of stretch and folds. Okay, we have been waiting 30 minutes and we are ready to do our fourth round of our stretch and folds. As you can see, we're already starting to get some nice bubbles popping up in our sourdough, which is a good sign. It means that we're going to have a nice rise on this. So I'm going to get my hands wet again, and we are going to do our stretch and fold. And again, sourdough is a high hydration bread, so it is going to be more of a sticky dough to work with versus a yeast-based bread. So the water helps keep it off, and we're just stretching and folding. Now we're going to cover it and we're going to let it sit. And this is the time where you guys can let it proof for anywhere between, an hour to 2 to 3 hours. You're just looking for it to kind of bulk up in size. Our sourdough has been proofing on the counter. You can see we've got some nice bubbles forming over here. Look at that beautiful bubble. We are now going to laminate and shape our loaf. So before we do that, I've got my Banneton basket. This is a loaf one. I'm going to sprinkle and kind of coat my whole cloth liner with flour. This is going to allow it, after the cold proof, to slide out when we're ready to score and get ready for baking. So I'm just kind of coating all around. And now we're going to dump out our dough and laminate it. So I always do it on a floured surface so it doesn't stick, and it shapes a little bit nicer. So we're going to pour it out, and you can sit and wait for it to fall on its own, but I'm always impatient and I just pick it up and grab it out. There we go. So we've got our dough here, and I'm going to take a little bit of flour and sprinkle it over the top. And again, this is to kind of prevent the sticking. And what we're going to do is we are going to laminate it, which is essentially stretching it out into a big rectangle. So we're going to stretch it out. And then I'm just trying to kind of pull evenly on it. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold a third in, fold it in, kind of like a burrito. And then we're going to roll our loaf up just like this. And now we're going to kind of bring our ends in one at a time. And we're going to kind of fasten them together. And this is kind of doing like with little pinches. And be careful not to pull too hard because you don't want to stretch it, but you kind of want to work it together. Now what I'm going to do is we got the pretty side goes down into our basket. And now, look at this big bubble. Now we're just going to pinch it and shape it together, kind of sealing our ends together. And I just do this over and over again. You don't want to pull so tight that you kind of break your seal on your outer things, but we're kind of tucking it in. There we go. And I'll sprinkle a little bit on so that it doesn't stick to it. And then we are going to cover it up, and we're going to put it in our fridge to cold proof for anywhere between 12 and 48 hours. Then we'll be ready to score and bake. We are going to be taking our Dutch oven out of the oven. I've had it preheating in here at 500 degrees for an hour. This way it's nice and hot. And we're going to put our cold proofed loaf into our hot Dutch oven. And when we do that, so I'm going to take it out. So this has been cold proofing since last night. We're going to move off our little lid. And now we're going to flip it out of the basket. And this is the Banditon basket. We're going to flip it out, and then we're going to score it. And I'm just slowly pulling it off because I don't want it to, kind of snag it. I want it to remain nice and pretty. And now we're going to do what our first thing is called an expansion score. So this is going to be a deep cut right down the middle of our loaf. And this is going to allow our sourdough to expand. And then we'll just do our basic kind of pretty wheat leaf design. This is like the most basic, but it's a classic and it's pretty right there. And I'll do a little slit up here. And now we are going to place this in our Banditon thing. So I'm going to put that right there. And we're going to take our parchment paper and we're going to slide this into my oval Dutch oven, which is great for making the loaves. And now we're going to place our lid right back on it. And this is going to go back in the oven at 500 degrees for 20 minutes. And after 20 minutes, we will take it out, remove the lid, and then we will cook it at 450 with the lid off. So we're going into the oven I'm going to set my timer here for 20 minutes, and then we'll be back. We are waiting for the last few seconds. Now we have finished off the 20 minutes at 500. So we're going to open it up, push OK on here, and then we're going to pull it out. We're going to remove the lid, and then we're going to put it back in the oven and cook it at 450 for 20 minutes. So look at my beautiful pop on there, this nice, lovely expansion. This is going to be a gorgeous loaf. I can already tell. And now we're going to pop it in here. And we're going to cancel out, and then you're going to take your oven and you're going to set it at 450 degrees. You want to bring it down because 500 will give you too dark of a crust. And then we are going to set the timer for 20 minutes. We'll be back in 20 minutes. Our timer is about to go off right now, so we're going to cancel it out and cancel our oven. And now it will be time to remove, nice and steamy, our loaf from the oven. Look at this gorgeous sourdough. It is popping. Honestly, this is probably the best loaf I've ever gotten from a brand new starter. Must have been the summertime heat, but it is absolutely gorgeous. Now, I love to remove mine right away from the pan because these pans will stay really hot for the next hour or so. So I move it out. Look at this gorgeous, nice, see our little wheat leaf design here. But one of the reasons why I also take it out is because I like to make sure that the bottom crust stays nice and light golden brown, not too dark, because if it gets too dark, then it gets really crunchy. But look where our expansion score is, how it is just totally popping here. And again, just look at this peak. That is a sign of a really great crumb. So I'm excited to cut into this in a few minutes. Now, when you first take your loaf out of the oven, you need to let it sit for about 10 minutes before you cut into it. That is because if you cut into it too early, it's gonna be gummy. You've gotta let the steam escape out of it before you cut it. It will still be nice and warm, but it will prevent the gumminess from forming. Okay, now that our bread has been cooling for about 10 minutes now, we are going to cut into it and check out the crumb from our first loaf made from our starter. And I have very promising thoughts with this. Look at this gorgeous crumb for our first sourdough. Pretty awesome here. I'm very excited. Look at the peaks on this. It's very, very high. And look at this squish. Do you see how this just squishes? It's such a soft and fluffy sourdough. Well, I hope you enjoyed our sourdough journey and making your starter, and I hope that you follow us for some more sourdough recipes and discard recipes.